We are starting Siman Pei Dalet, Hilchos Tzarim. It's Siman Pei Dalet. I'm going to just give a drop of an introduction before we start the actual Siman. Okay, and part of the introduction is to tell you that we're going to probably be a little bit different than we've done in the past with Hagal's Kalim and Bishlagim, in that we're going to try to stay more to the, if I can use the word, practical issues, if we can say that, and less in the, so to speak, details of what the Shulchan says. Okay, now, to introduce it, we'll say it like this. The Torah tells us that there's 3 different types of insects that are Assur. The insects in the water, insects that fly, and insects that are in the land. Okay, so the first question that strikes you is, why did the Torah have to tell you?
On this call, press 1. Returning to the conference room.
Why did the Torah have to tell you 3 different types of insects? Why did it say that water insects and land insects? Why didn't it just tell you that insects are Assur? What's the reason for the detail? The Torah has to give you these different varieties. I know that the Torah, you over a more lavin because it says it many times. But even so, what's the point to say it in all these different ways, just to make the point that there's these different types of bugs? The answer is, the surprise is, that really the Torah is only telling you that very specific bugs are Assur. Many insects are mutter. Okay, only very specific insects. The Torah, by telling you which ones you can't eat, is telling you this one don't eat and this one don't eat, and other ones are very mutter. Okay, and for example, let's go through the 3 groups. The bugs that are based in the water. That's going to be the first 3 halachos. The first 3 halachos are going to be about bugs that are based in the water. Those are limited to which ones are Assur. I'm going to get back to that in a second because that's our halachos we're going to talk about. Flying bugs that fly, sheretz oif. It says in the Torah, kol sheretz oif. So all sheretz oif is Assur. But there's an exception. Those are chagavim. That's the next psukim in the Torah. That's Siman Pei Hei is going to be about chagavim. That's a flying insect. That's mutter under certain circumstances. That's Siman Pei Hei. That's not our Siman. And land bugs, the Torah says, only v'chol sheretz ha-sheretz al-ha'aretz, from which we learn out that bugs are only Assur if they crawl on the ground. And what that means is going to be the second part of the Siman. That's the middle and the end halachas of the Siman are about that kind of thing. So I'm just pointing it out to you that the Torah is telling us very specific rules on which things are mutter and Assur. It's not all bugs are Assur. Certain types of insects are Assur. And the truth is, most of the Siman is about which insects are mutter, not about which insects are Assur. Okay, the other 2 parts of the Siman, I'll just to round it out, the other 2 parts of the Siman is going to be a few halachas about bugs that are burnt or dried out. They're mutter for another reason. That's not because they were inherently mutter, they're mutter for some special reason. And a few halachas is what you most think about when you think about insects, is how do you check for them, or when you're mechuyev to check for them. Okay, but that's a few halachas in the middle and towards the end. Okay, now, to the halachas we're about to start, which is the first 3 halachas about water-based bugs. So the Gemara says, the Gemara in Chulin divides those bugs into roughly into 4 different groups. Okay, we're going to start from the worst to the best. Okay, the worst is the ones that are found in yamim and nechalim, in rivers and lakes. And the Torah says specifically those are Assur. It says bugs that are in the yamim and nechalim are Assur. And the definition, the Gemara describes what does it mean a yam and what are yam and nechalim. What's their definitive feature? We can see it in the Shulchan Aruch in a second. Is that they're noivim and they're moishchim. Noivim means that they have a water source. There's a continuous supply of fresh water from some kind of a spring, and moishchim means that the water flows or moves in that body of water all the time. Okay, that's what yam and nechalim. That's what the Torah says is Assur. That's the classic case. That's what the Torah tells you not to eat from. What happens if you find, the next case down is called charitzin and yitzin. That means canals and other smaller bodies of water. We'll find out what that means. It's going to be halacha beis. It's going to be about that. There's a machlokes in the Gemara what the din is for that case. There's a machlokes Rishonim what the Gemara means about that case, and that's halacha beis.
Which Gemara?
In Chulin, in Samach Zayin, that's a machlokes in the Gemara. Machlokes Rishonim what the Gemara means of it, and that's halacha beis. Okay. Then the last 2 are very similar. One is Briyaso, water that's in bugs that are in a bar, which is a well, a pit, some kind of some other collection of water. Those bugs is not moishchin and not noivim. They have no water source. They just get filled up, and they don't flow or move. They're just sitting there. Okay, those are. That is.
Graduation?
Oh, I know about it. Okay. Those are mutter, as long as they stay in the bar. And a case that's very similar to that is bugs that are in kalim. Okay, the difference between kalim and Briyaso is that kalim are not even attached to the ground. They're just a container, just a big cistern, just a water tank. Those are also, they're not like yam and home at all, and those are also mutter. Okay, so we have these four groups of bugs. I hope I didn't say that too quickly. Okay, these four different types of places where the bug would be found, depending where they're found.
How do they get there?
What?
Found or grown?
Grown. Where they came from. I'm correct. You're correct, David. Where they came from. That they came from that spot. They were born in that spot. If they're born in that spot, let's say you have a keli. Okay, you have a cup of water and you leave it on the table and you come back tomorrow and there's bugs in it and those bugs were born right in there. I don't mean they flew in. They were born in the thing. Spontaneous. Yeah, we're not going to deal with spontaneous generation until way later at the end of the simon, until we get to the fish. But for the ones that come in the water by themselves, those are mutter. Okay, so let's start the simon. Halachav. Shrotzim hagrelim b'mayim shebekalim shebebaris sichon v'aris. Bugs that grow in water which is in kalim, that's the most obvious case that's mutter, or baris sichon v'aris is three different types of wells and pools and things like that. She'enim noivim, that they're not noivim, meaning they have no water source to them. So those are mutar. They're mutter, because that's not considered a yam home. It's not charitzin and itzin because it's not noivim. So those are for sure mutter. Okay, so you have in your backyard, there's a puddle of water, and in that water starts to grow bugs. Those bugs are mutter. Even though they have no fins and scales, meaning they're not mutter because they're fish that are kosher. They're not kosher fish. They don't have fins and scales. They're still mutter anyhow. Therefore, you could bend down and drink from them. You don't have to worry that bugs are getting out. You could sit, if you're sitting in the water and you want to drink, you could open it mouth and drink what you want to. Don't worry if there are bugs in there. Okay, so Ramah says, Avo, Assur, Lishoy, Beklev, Lishoy, but you can't, when the Mechaber said you could sit in the water and drink, you could sit in the water and drink, but you can't scoop it out with a cup. Okay, now why the Ramah says this, it's going to be for next time. We're going to, for now, ignore that part of the Ramah, we'll do it next time.
So you can with your hand, like, feet water.
Whether you can with your hand, we're not talking about that. We're talking about it says open it, it says,
hands also.
We'll talk about that next time. It says you could sit down, bend down to the water and drink out of the water. That's what the Mechaber said you're allowed to do. Right, you're allowed to do. Okay, what the Rambam means, what you're not allowed to do is going to be for next time. If the impurishim mokum revisan, so the Mechaber says, but if they left the place where they grew, if they left the place where they were born, where they grew up, what happens if they went to the back outside of the bar, or they're in a kli, they went to the outside of that kli? Even though they went back into the water, Assurim, they're Assur. Because once they left their place, then they don't have the din anymore of water bugs, and they become Assur. They were pure sitzo. Excuse me?
How would you even know such?
That's the next word to Shulchan Aruch. You don't have to be worried that they left. If you find them in the water there, you assume that that's where they were, and that's where they came. You don't have to be choshesh. But we're going to talk about next time when you do have to be choshesh. That has to do with the Ramah, when you have to be choshesh. But we're going to say that you don't have to be choshesh. If they only went onto the walls of the container on the inside, I mean, if you think about it, there's water in this bucket, and now the bugs might have gone into the inside walls of the bucket and then fell back into the water, that would be okay. It's still mutarim because that whole place is considered their makom Briyaso, and that's the place where they grew born. That's their habitat, and therefore, since they never left that habitat, they stay mutar. Okay? If they went out of the kli and fell back in, they would be assur. If they stayed in the kli, even on the inside, they're going to be mutar.
And this has absolutely nothing to do with whether it's spontaneously generated or not.
Right.
It's clear, the clear thing of it. Egg is laid, zachar cave or whatever.
Right. But that's why we're not talking about spontaneous generation until the end of the simon. By the fish, that's where it's more negated. But for this part, it has nothing to do with it. It doesn't make a difference. If their mother and father could be still sitting there. They're all sitting there together by the Shalom Zachar. But it doesn't make a difference. They're not, it doesn't make a difference. If they were born there, that's their place, and they're mutar.
The parents came from the outside.
Right. The spontaneous generation is not relevant here. Again, it's later at the end of the simon. For us, it's not here. That's what I'm not talking about. Okay. Now, as I sort of said to you, the halachos about checking things for bugs, to find bugs, which is what we think about, doesn't start to halacha ches. So until then, and most of the simon is not about checking for bugs. It's about bugs that you know are there. Okay, at the very end of the simon is halacha fiyasi. It says that the minig is that even if you have cheese and there's bugs that worm that are kovtzim heina v'heina. You see them jumping around in the cheese. You can eat the cheese. Okay, so I don't think when it says minig over there, don't take it as if people looked to them like the minig was. They went to try to find the cheese. Whatever, why it says minig over there, but the din is you're allowed to. Okay, even though you see in front of because you see. Okay, that has nothing to do with that. But that's the word minig over there is for a different reason. But anyhow, it's completely mutter. Okay, now.
These things are open, right? There's no kashrus that maybe a flying bug fell in there and
should we chosh this is a flying bug?
I mean, you have to look at wings, but you only have to check.
I'm not sure. I guess you're assuming that it's not a flying bug. Okay, a flying bug would be Assur under its own conditions.
Right.
Okay, yes, that's true. That's a okay.
So you don't even have to check the water to make sure the bug is a water bug.
So you check the bug.
You have to at least see.
You're saying if it looks like a flying bug that fell into the water, then I guess you would not eat it. Then it would be a flying bug.
So you have to still look at the bugs in the water, make sure they're
To remain on this call, press 1. Returning to the conference room.
So what are the limits of the definition of a sheretz? So,
What do you mean by that?
so why isn't a clam was born in the water?
So this it's an interesting question. I don't really know the answer. There's going to be a halacha at the very end of the siman about this bird-like creature, and it's not clear is that thing a bird or is it a sheretz oif. A sheretz oif would be Assur, and a sheretz oif could be mutter in the right cases, and a bird would be Assur. That's a question. So I'm not clear to me. How do you decide when does this thing become so big that it becomes a fish? Zooplankton. Okay, these tiny little things that are underwater. Are those fish that need to have fins and scales, which of course they don't have, or are they worms? Are they bugs? So that's not. It's a good question. Maybe I can find a better definition.
There's thousands of little creatures.
Little things. Well, how when it gets how big did it turn into a?
Why not? Maybe it's very big. Why not an octopus? An octopus is also because it's a duck tummy, and an octopus is also because it's a sheretz.
So obviously, you know that an octopus is a dog tummy, but the question is, how do you know that? Why is it so obvious that the octopus is this and the sheretz not? I'm not sure. That's a good question.
I mean, by the definition, the Rashi said, what's sheret? The only way you recognize it when you see walking around.
Yeah.
If you say it still, you don't recognize that it's an animal. That's the word sheret means. That's what Rashi translates.
A crab is not a sheretz.
Right. Sometimes you could see the bat like the creature.
And an ant, you don't think it's a sheretz?
It is.
It is. But you could see an ant. I mean, depending on how you look at it, you could see it also.
Different guys, it's still
shrimp.
You see an animal.
But from a distance, you wouldn't notice it unless it was moving out.
But that's the aside.
You got cockroaches that are as big as some shrimp, you know. So sometimes it's
not that's sheret.
Okay, fine.
That's actually fine sheret, right? Should not be, right? Because you see.
So those are cockroaches. Some big cockroach is not a sheretz. It's a joke. Israeli joke is not a sheretz.
Birds, they're bigger than what you're talking about in the water and the cheese. So, I think the things you're talking about are so small that unless there's a large amount of them, or if you look closely, you will see them. But if you have something that when it becomes nogea to our world, it's big enough that you would see it without any problem. But when it's born, it's very small, but still you can see that it's.
Do you think it depends when it was born? How big it is at that point?
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe. Okay, guys, let's go on. Okay. So the Achronim talk about, and even though we're going to see, we see in this halacha, and then we're going to see in many halachas that there are specific insects that are mutter. There are lots of insects in this simon that are going to be mutter. They're going to say that in many cases there's an issue to eat those bugs anyhow because of something else called Bal Tishaktzu. Okay? You're not supposed to do things that are disgusting. Okay? That's not related. That's not because the bug is inherently Assur. The bug is inherently mutter, but you're not allowed to do that anyhow.
Well, we know people do eat chagov.
We're getting there. Give me a second. Okay, so we're getting there also. Okay, so one of the strongest, if I could use the word makar to that din, is the Gemara says in Shabbos that it's min hadin. From the letter of the law, you'd be allowed to eat live chagavim. Okay, chagavim are mutter. They don't need shchita. They don't even need to be dead min hadin. But the Gemara says that you're not allowed to because it's Bal Tishaktzu. Okay, it's considered disgusting for people to eat live chagavim, and therefore you're not allowed to. And so here it's something that's mutter. It's a food that's kosher, but you're not allowed to eat that. And the Ramah brings something like that in Siman Yud Gimel way back where he says you're not allowed to eat live fish. Okay, fish have the same din. They don't have to even be dead to eat them. Min hadin. From the letter of the law, but because it's Bal Tishaktzu, you're not allowed to eat live fish.
Bal Tishaktzu is subjective to the time of.
That's what I'm coming to. Okay, the Beis Yosef in is mesupik whether when we say Bal Tishaktzu, which is really a pasuk, Okay, Bal Tishaktzu is not Sheisechem. I think it's a positive. You're not allowed to beat Bal Tishaktzu. Is that a Briyaso or the Rabbanon? Briyaso himself is mesupik about that. The Taz over there seems to say it's a Briyaso. It's not clear 100%, but he seems to say like that. The Pre-Chodesh by us says that it's a D'Rabbanan, and it's a big shayla in whether it's a Briyaso or D'Rabbanan. It's coming from a pasuk, but is it really a Briyaso or is it just a D'Rabbanan, just an asmachta from that pasuk? Okay. Now, the Shulchan Taz by us, I'm saying it to you the way the Pri Megadim understands them. The Shulchan Taz by us say like this. In our case, it says the guy could bend down and drink out of the lake, out of the swimming pool. He's in a swimming pool, and he could drink, there are warm bugs floating around, he could drink them. So they say, obviously, people don't find those things to be disgusting. Okay? Obviously, it's not Bal Tishaktzu, and that's why the person is allowed to drink it. Since you're drinking it together with the rest of your water, it doesn't bother people. Okay? Were it to bother people, if people were to be bothered by the fact that they was in there, if you would find it disgusting to drink that, then you would not be allowed to. Okay? Maybe, if we get to it next time, when we hope to talk about the copepods in New York's water, okay, this question of whether people would find it disgusting was negated to them as far as them filtering the water on Shabbos. If you live in New York and you want to filter your water...
Anyway, it's coming from a pool of water anyways.
What's the problem?
You said that it's us, it depends if a bug grows in a pot.
In a bar?
If it comes
yes, you're right. Okay.
That's not back it up because it's anyways coming from a river.
No, in a bar is mutter.
From the river.
No. Let me back up. Let me back up a second. Okay. All water comes from someplace else. Okay. So when we say that there's water in a container, when we say there's water in a container and it has a certain thing, it doesn't mean that the water was created there. Someone mixed hydrogen and oxygen and created water in that container. That's not what it means.
Oh, I thought it came from the rain.
No, it doesn't have to come from the rain. Wherever the water came from, wherever the water is,
we don't know where it grew.
You have to know where the bug grew. It depends where the bug grew. But the water that's in your swimming pool is water that's in a bar. Water that's in clay. That's where the water is. If a bug is born in that water, if you put in clean water and now a bug comes that's water in the bar. The fact that it came from a river doesn't make a difference. If you go to your house and you take water out of the sink, even though it came from Lake Michigan, now it's water in a clean. You don't say, oh, this is water from a yam because it's from Lake Michigan. No. We look at the water.
We already knew for a fact that it grew after...
If we know that it grew afterwards. So we're assuming that, and we'll see more next week, next time, that there's scientists who know very much, and I guess the people that knew that also, where these things grow. Okay, all bugs don't grow in all places, and they got it all down pat. By looking at the bug, they can tell you where. Okay, so the
same scientists who believe in spontaneous generation.
They don't believe in spontaneous generation. Right. Okay. So the Pre-Chodesh gives us a bunch of pratim about Bal Tishaktzu. They're not all negated to us, but I'll say them because this is what the Pre-Chodesh talks about. Okay. First of all, Bal Tishaktzu is not something, it's not a Halachos from Sinai. The Torah doesn't tell us this is disgusting. It depends on what people think is repulsive or appetizing. It depends on where you are and your time and your place, what is or is not considered acceptable. It's not like a din that this is disgusting. It's what people consider good or bad. So the people who Moshe knows who eat live bugs, if that's in their place and that place is considered reasonable, then that's fine. You're allowed to do. Now, what happens if you find something?
I don't think the Shach agrees to that.
That what?
That's telling the person.
Because
the Shach, when he said don't about the Shach, he said because it's kavod, it's to drink the water. No question about the Shach. So that's it's what like you say.
No, the Pri Megadim says that they're not arguing. Pri Megadim says that's why I said according to the Pri Megadim. That's why I said that. Pri Megadim says that they're not arguing with each other. The Shach is saying what the assumption is. We're the person to find it disgusting. The Shach is saying I'm assuming people don't find it disgusting. We're the person to find it disgusting. So you'll look afterwards in the little words in the Pri Megadim afterwards. The Pri Megadim says that they're not arguing. He said they're not arguing. Okay. Now the next thing is, what happens if you find it to be disgusting, but most people don't? Okay, you look at avocado and you say, oh my gosh, avocado, I can't eat this stuff. Okay, it makes me disgusted. And everybody else thinks that is a normal, regular food. Okay, what's the din there? So the Pre-Chodesh says that that's Assur, and it comes from a Mishnah in Chulin. The Mishnah in Chulin says that if an animal gives birth, and inside there's a shilya, there's a fetus inside of it. If you think it's okay, if you're comfortable eating it, then eat it. And if you're not comfortable eating it, then don't eat it. Okay, it's Bal Tishaktzu, it depends on you. Meaning,
Subjective.
it's subjective. If you think it's disgusting, then don't eat it. So because that's for a case where most people consider it acceptable. Okay? Most people think that avocado is fine. And you find it putrid. You can't imagine eating an avocado. So for you, you're not allowed to eat it. For you, it's Bal Tishaktzu. And everybody else, it's fine. There's nothing wrong with it.
When we say basing that Bal Tishaktzu is Rabbanan, when we say by Bishul Yisrael, now what touches up what needs cooking, that depends on the area that you live in. So why would that be different? I don't think there's a chiluk to you. I wouldn't eat it raw. That it would be a dinner b'shlachim. Look at the makom of that city.
Right. So I'm not up to your case that you're thinking about. I'm saying so far as people find it acceptable, people eat.
Right.
It's avocado. You personally don't like it. So for you, it's Bal Tishaktzu. It's a so to speak a personal decision. It's not a.
We're going on over the lot of Bal Tishaktzu. I'm not. Okay.
Now,
Have you ever tried something? Let's say like you're eating, like sushi. You've never had sushi before. It looks gross or whatever, raw fish, and then you try like.
It looks gross.
Is it Assur?
I'm
not afraid it's not Assur because you actually liked it.
I think looking gross is
Returning to the conference room.
disgusting, not because it looks interesting or strange or.
it has to be disgusting. Not just.
I'm saying people eat gross stuff like ketchup, but but once you
Listen,
try it,
what I'm saying is that if you're willing to try it, and obviously you don't find it so horrible, it's within range of what you think seems reasonable, and go try that.
You don't like the taste. I can't stand this taste. That's not the shock.
No, I'm saying the same point of.
Okay. Next part of the pre-chodesh is this: what happens if people knew that that the bug was there, they wouldn't eat it, but they just don't know. Okay, like think about it. Think about the people you meet in companies and you tell them there are bugs in broccoli. They happily eat the broccoli. They don't know there's bugs in it. If they knew they were there, they wouldn't want to eat it. Okay, but they're happily oblivious, and they just eat the thing without knowing that there's anything in there. Is that considered Bal Tishaktzu? That's not Bal, or is it not Bal Tishaktzu? If they knew it was there, they would be disgusted. But they don't know, and they're happily oblivious, and they eat the food. Is that, or is that not Bal Tishaktzu to eat the food?
Bal Tishaktzu. Is another person relevant for Bal Tishaktzu?
We're going to get there in a second. If somebody else is relevant, so that's the last case, the last two cases.
How could you be Bal Tishaktzu if you don't even know it's there?
So the question is it or is it not? Well, meaning if you would know, if I would show you the bug inside the broccoli, you wouldn't want to eat it. But now you're not disgusted by it. So maybe that should make it Assur because I really don't want to eat that.
You would never be able to eat it.
I wouldn't eat out there.
How do you ever know?
How would you know that it's it? Okay. Anyhow, okay, we could argue about it. And he brings a right from a Gemara in Chulun also that Ravina told his mother. He says, "Ma," I don't know if you saw Ma. I don't know what you called her. He said, "But Ma, if you see worms in the fish, hide them that I won't notice them because they're really mutter min hadin, and that way I'll eat them." Okay. Just make sure that I don't notice them. Just make sure they're covered over with something that I don't notice them, and I'll eat them. Notice they're mutter min hadin. Why waste the fish, cut it up to get out those worms? So just make sure that I don't notice them. Meaning, even though I won't notice them, if I would notice them, I wouldn't want to eat them. I would be disgusted by them. Okay, that's how Rashi looked.
Something to do with blood, maybe? If you don't see the blood, it's mutter?
No. This isn't that min hadin is mutter. The worm,
That is not if you don't see.
but this thing,
in your mouth?
that's different. Right, that's different. That blood is mutter. Yes, I guess it's similar. The blood is mutter. In this case, the worm is mutter. If you would know it was there, you would be disgusted by it. You would not be allowed to eat it, even though it's mutter. But which is what a lot of people said when they heard about the worms in the fish. When they saw the worms, they go, "Oh gosh, I don't know if it's mutter. I don't want to eat that stuff." Right? That's how people look. That was a lot of people's reaction. But Ravina said to his mother, "I know that if I would see it, it's Assur. I know that it's mutter min hadin. So just make sure that I don't notice it. Cover it up in a way that I don't notice it." Okay, so that's mutter Assur. Okay, now next the Gemara says in Makkos that if the water that you use to draw blood. That's the water. The container, the kli that you use to draw blood, they use like suction blood out of people for bloodletting. It's Bal Tishaktzu to drink water out of that cup. Okay, and in Siman Kuf Tezayin, the Shulchan Aruch brings a whole bunch of similar things. I don't need to tell you all the examples yet. Okay, all things that are really disgusting things to drink out of. You can't drink out of this, and you can't drink out of that. And so it comes from a Gemara Makkos that you're not allowed to drink out of the cup that they use for bloodletting. It's considered to be Bal Tishaktzu. So it's not pre-chodesh. That tells us that if there's something that basically everybody in the world finds disgusting, that's what that list in Kuf Tezayin is, things that almost everybody in the world, basically everybody in the world finds disgusting, that thing you're not allowed to use, you're not allowed to do, even if it doesn't bother you. Even if to you it doesn't mean anything, that you're not allowed to do, because, again, even though we said that Bal Tishaktzu is dependent on you, if you find it disgusting, you can't have it. But if everybody finds this thing disgusting, then you can't. You're not allowed to do it and say, for me it doesn't bother me, it doesn't make a difference. Okay, that you're not allowed to do it. Now, it so happens, just as an aside, the Pri Chodesh tells you, go look in Siman Samach Vav, where he talks about this. That's what he tells you, look there. There it's a din about a chicken that sat on an egg for a couple of days. Okay, and there's a question whether it is or is not Bal Tishaktzu to eat that egg after it started to develop into a chick. And you should just know that the din of the Shulchan Aruch says not like the Pri Chodesh over there. Okay, the Shulchan Aruch there says that it is mutter. Okay, so that's just on the side. And that's what the Pri Chodesh says. The last case that we have to talk about is, which is probably the most nageh, is what happens if not everybody thinks it's disgusting, but most people think it's disgusting. Okay, most people in the world would think this is disgusting, but there's a fair amount that think that it's not, and you're from the minority. Okay, not that basically everybody does. It's 60-40, and most people think that it's disgusting. 70-30, most people think it's disgusting, and you happen to be, so it doesn't bother you. Okay, that's a machlokes nachar. Okay, the Pri Megadim says that it's mutter. Pri Megadim says by us that the food is mutter. He says the Knesset Agdol says that it's assur. It's a question. There's a whole bunch of achronim. There's a documentary about it in Sivkat and Yidal. A lot of places will talk about this. Again, a food that's most people find it to be Bal Tishaktzu, but there's a fair amount of people who don't. So am I sort of stuck with them? The fact that most people find it assur is like kufte zayin, that things that everybody finds disgusting, I'm not allowed to eat. Well, you say, wait a second, this is subjective. If I'm not bothered by it, then I'm not bothered by it. Okay, that's a question. Okay, one last thing we need to talk about. We have another few minutes.
Would it make a difference if it's the rice or the rabbanon, whether you use objective or subjective? Is that anything? Like Marasai, for sure it's subjective because for sure it's the rabbanon.
Okay, you're saying maybe if it's the rice, then it more depends on what everybody does. There might be more like a rule to it, as opposed to. Okay, I'm not sure. Maybe my thinking is that Bal Tishaktzu is not. The Torah doesn't give a list of don't eat these 10 foods. It says don't eat things that people find disgusting. So your Zaidi thought that it was disgusting to eat raw fish. That doesn't mean that nowadays it might be different. So the Torah is not telling you don't eat raw fish. It's saying if in your time, right? It's telling the whole rule is things that people find disgusting don't do so. Right. So it's. I'm guessing that even if it's a derisa, it's probably still these kind of rules apply to being subjective. But I'm not sure. Okay. The last is like this. That they told the Chazal what to do. Right. Okay. Maybe. Okay. Now the fact. Now we're talking now about a big possible kula, which is like this. We're talking about the fact that there are insects that are mutter. For example, in our case, the bugs that develop in the water are mutter until they leave the water, until they get to, let's say, to the back of the clay. We're going to have later about bugs on the ground. They're not assur until they walk. Okay, or in certain cases, they're not assur until they walk. So came along Shlomo Kluger, and because of that, he came up with a big kula. And he said like this.
Listen, you wrote almost 100 books. Which one?
It's in Kel Galv Sim Kuf Samach. Okay, in Kuf Tamad. Okay. And the truth is, Crazy Placey says the same thing also. He says it as Mitichlas, and the Dagum Ravava, printed in the back of the Shulchan Aruch, says that it sounds right to him. He said, I'm not 100%, but it sounds right. At first glance, it sounds right to him. Okay, and he says like this: the din is that but if a bug was mixed into other foods, we would say that a whole bug was mixed in. It's not going to be bottled because it's a barrier. It's a whole item. Okay, and we're going to talk about that later. When is it or when is it not bottled? But potentially, we'd say it's not bottled because it's a barrier. It's a whole item. Whole items can't be bottled. The din is that a barrier can only the only time the barrier is not bottled if the barrier is, in the words of the Shulchan Aruch, is Assur Mitichlas Briyaso. It's been assur forever. It's always been assur. Something that was used to be mutter and became assur, let's say it was basar b'cholov. Okay, you had meat, and that meat got mixed with, cooked with milk and became basar b'cholov. That's never a barrier. A barrier means something that was always assur. Something that Ashar Hanisko. It's something like that. Ashar Hanisko means it was when it was born, it was kosher. You're allowed to eat this animal. It went ahead and it attacked some other person, became Ashar Hanisko. That animal is mutter. Can't be a barrier. We don't treat it as a barrier because it hasn't always been assur. So Shlomo Kluger said, no, bugs weren't always assur. When the bug was born, he was mutter. He only became assur when he walked, when he got into the back of the clay.
Was it too small?
No, it's mutter because bugs that are born in the water are only assur if they're born in certain types of water, or if they leave the water. Bugs that are on fruits and vegetables are only assur when they start to crawl. Okay, in certain cases, only if they start to crawl. So when they were born, they were mutter.
When they were born, they were too small to be a bug too.
No, so for this case, say when they became visible, okay, when they came to the point that they became assur. when they came to this,
could have been us.
when it came to the point that the din considers it visible, considers it existing, was it also was that? So some bugs, and this is important, it's important for the rayas, which we're not going to talk about. Some bugs are going to be also Mitichlas Briyaso. For example, let's say a bug was born in Lake Michigan. A bug that's born in the yam is also from the time it's born. It doesn't have to go anyplace. Okay, and that will explain why there are rayas that there is such a thing as a bug being a barrier. Because there is an example of awesome Mitichlas Briyaso, but there's lots of bugs that are not awesome. For example, this is the big shiloh is bugs in flour. Okay, the bugs that are found in flour would not be awesome unless they moved. We'll get to why later. They wouldn't be awesome until they move. So he says, but they're not barriers. They're not a barrier because it wasn't awesome when it was born. When it was born, it was mutter. It only became awesome later. It's not a barrier. That was
because it didn't move when it was born.
It didn't move. Those bugs that are not attached to the ground. No, it's not until it moves. It doesn't become usher. It might move 5 minutes later, but that means it was not usher from the time it was born. It became usher later in life. Later could have been 5 minutes later, but it wasn't.
Call, press 1. Returning to the conference room.
Okay. Okay. So what we're going to talk about is the truth is that most Lachmanim do not agree with this, okay? And the accepted halacha is that bugs are considered barriers, okay? And we're not going to talk about the rayas back and forth. That's too much for us to talk about all the rayas. I don't know them, and it's too complicated. All the rayas back and forth about this. But I just want to talk about what's the svara. What should be the reason why someone should argue? What's wrong with what he's saying? What's the reason to think he seems to have a good point? They're not awesome Mitichlas Briyaso. It's not awesome Mitichlas Briyaso. Why should they be considered barriers? Okay, so I'm going to tell you 2 or sort of 3 reasons that the Achronim say why it might not be true. Okay, one is the Chavos says, how do we know that a bug? Where does it come from that a barrier has to be awesome Mitichlas Briyaso? So he says it comes from Rashba and other Rishonim who say the same point. And the Rashba says like this. He says, "Dafka she'isura machmas atzma kegoyin nemolo gid." It has to have been also inherently also like a nemolo or like a gid anasha. Shasur, I'm skipping somewhere. Shasur mitzat atzma mitchilas briyaso. Avoberia muteres. Ela shekiblu isur machmas davar acher. If it was really mutter, but it got isur from something else, kegoyin shara nisko. Ein zuberia she'ena betel. That's not the kind of barrier that's not possible. Okay, so what Chavos says is, the Rashba said was, also Mitichlas Briyaso is a way of knowing whether the thing is inherently Assur. So the criteria here is not, is it always Assur or is it not always Assur? The question is it inherently Assur or is it not inherently Assur? Ashara Nisko, there's nothing inherently Assur about the animal. It's just that the animal did something that made it Assur. As opposed to a Gid Anosha is inherently Assur. Okay, and usually the way we decide if something is inherently Assur or not inherently Assur is by looking whether it's been Assur its whole life. If it was always Assur, that's usually a sign that there's something inherently wrong with this thing. So he says that an insect, what's wrong with the insect? It's not that the insect did something wrong. The walking is not what made the insect Assur. It didn't say, oh, now that you walked, insects that walked, are you not allowed to eat them? It's that insects are inherently Assur. There's something inherently wrong. The Torah doesn't want you to eat insects. There's like a condition. They don't become Assur until they walk. So it's just a condition. It's not like they became Assur because they walked. And therefore, the criteria is really not Assur Mitichlas Briyaso. The criteria is, are they inherently Assur? That's, you see it in the words in the Eshkol, it's even stronger. Is that the criteria for what? The criteria is, are you inherently Assur? Insects are inherently Assur. Whether they walked or they didn't walk, it's just a t'nai. It's just a condition. Turns out they don't become Assur until a certain time. But they are inherently Assur. Okay? Yes?
A behemoth, even, I don't know if I'm saying this or this, but when a behemoth is born, it's also b'cheskes Isser. Because Abram and Achayar in a shluta, so why by showing this go, I want to go from the Isser of...
I don't know. I have no idea.
Same thing in essence is with the Simanim of Treif. You know, there's a Chikira. I think the Rogachover says a Chikira are the Simanim things that make it
Okay.
or a Siman Mevarer.
Okay.
Similar thing to what you're saying here. Is it inherently
that you mean
Assur? And how do we know?
Okay, you could say that. I could accept it. Yes. Yes. So the walking, right? The bug. When we say a bug is Assur, we all understand that a bug is inherently Assur.
Right.
Why does it have to walk? We don't know why the din is that it has to walk, but that's the Chavos says that's just a tanai, just a way of turning on the Isser, so to speak. But the Isser is there because of the inherent thing about it. It's not that the walking makes it Assur.
The sheretz, right? That's sheretz, right?
What about it?
So I'm saying it's called a sheretz, so maybe that's
okay.
why the walking.
Well, that's sort of about the next answer. Wait, hold that for 1 second, okay? The next answer is this is the Chavstas. The Gemara says like this. The Gemara says, Chalev, for whatever the Gemara is talking about, the Gemara says that Chalev never had a Shas HaKosher. Chalev is parts of the animal that you're not allowed to eat, certain fats that you're not allowed to eat, and the Gemara says it never had a Shas HaKosher, which is, those words sure sound very much the same as Assur Mitichlas Briyaso. Shas HaKosher, never had a time when it was kosher, and or the opposite of that is Assur Mitichlas Briyaso. So the Rashba says, even though the Gemara said that the Chalev never had a Shas HaKosher, he says, there's a sheet of Rabbi Yehuda that shlil, the chalev is mutter. Okay, you let eat the chalev. You let eat that chalev. So the Rashba says you should know that even though the chalev in this embryo is mutter, the chalev is mutter there, we still consider, even Rabbi Yehuda will agree that chalev was assur, it never was mutter. How could that be? The Rashba says, because when the chalev was in the shlil, according to Rabbi Yehuda, it wasn't chalev. When it becomes to the size, or when it's born and it becomes assur, that's when it becomes chalev. So it's not that it was chalev when it was mutter. Then it wasn't chalev. That wasn't called chalev at that point. When it becomes to cross the line and becomes assur, it becomes chalev. So the chalev was always assur. Yesterday it wasn't chalev. Yesterday it was something else. So the Chavstas says the same thing with the bug. When we went until the certain shrutzim that are mutter, they're not shrutzim. They only, this maybe what Doug was saying. They become, the Torah calls them shrutzim when they meet some criteria. They walk, they get out of the clear, whatever the criteria is that they have to pass to get there, they become a sheretz when they do that point. So they're not shrutzim until they hit that spot. Okay, and the Pri Megadim says in a different way. Pri Megadim in Simkot, by Assur Mitichlas Briyaso, says that same idea but in a different way. He says, a bug that's in a place that it's mutter, and he's talking about bugs that are in an animal, or in a fish, that bug is considered to be not an independent being, it's considered part of the fish, or we would say part of the water. And the reason why it's mutter is because it's not a bug yet. Okay, it's not, the Torah doesn't look at it as an independent body, it's part of the other body. It's part of the other thing. When it moves, when it leaves the thing, let's say in our case, it leaves the water, now it's not water anymore, now it's an independent being, and we judge it by itself. Is it mutter or is it assur? And we say that it's assur. Okay, it's a similar idea to what the Chavstas says, and that, what the Pri Megadim says, is very much what we're doing in a Gemara, and we're going to have it later in Halacha Tezayin, which is, we say that the Gemara, the din is, that worms that are inside of animals, okay, are assur because of Evim and Achai. Okay, they're considered to be part of the living animal. The animal is Evim and Achai, and the worms that are in there, the Gemara says, are Evim and Achai to eat those animals, because the worm is considered part of the animal, which is what the Pri Megadim is saying, which is, before the bug becomes... The animal's alive. Well, the animal was alive.
When you eat it, the animal's dead. So how can you have part of the animal's living, part of the animal?
Get the Tezak. I'm just giving you the idea. The idea that the Pri Megadim says is that until the animal does the thing that it has to, like walk or leave the place where it was, it's considered part of the original thing. So it's not considered a sheretz, it's considered an animal, or it's considered a puddle of water. In our case, it's water. It's not bugs yet. When it leaves and gets to the outside, then it becomes a sheretz, and at that point it could be potentially assur, depending on what it is. So which is what the Chavstas is saying. Again, we're trying to explain why, not like a Shulchan Kluger, it is Assur Mitichlas Briyaso. It's assur from when it was created, because the din says before it left the animal or the water or the plant, until that point it was a piece of potato. Okay, it was flour. When it left, that's when it became an independent being, and that sheretz was always assur from time to time.